to Quality Coffee Break. Now, today we're talking about external audits, aren't we, Susie?
Yes. How are we going to prepare for
Mm.
an external inspection or audit, what have you?
hmm Sometimes these can be quite scary times. Everybody seems to be, a little bit stressed. So, as well as preparing for an external audit, it's also your job to make sure everybody keeps calm, or as the Brits say, keep calm and carry on. Because nobody likes flapping, do they?
No, good advice. Rule number one, stay calm.
Stay
Don't
calm.
panic.
Don't panic. Everything will be okay. Um, in addition to that, so you want to be prepared, right? So in terms of getting your house in order, and what kind of things do you reckon people should be doing, Susie, when they're getting their house in order, ready for
Yeah.
audits?
I think getting your house in order, I mean, you should be starting this probably a month to 6 weeks before the audit is scheduled for. If you have an audit scheduled date, like you won't always have an audit scheduled date. Sometimes they're unannounced inspections. But if you have a date, then I would say, 4 to 6 weeks prior to that date is when you want to start getting your house in order. And by that, I usually mean we're going to do walkthroughs. We're going to look high and low. So you're going to look up in the corners, you're going to look on the ceiling, you're going to look on the floor. These things that people who are in that space every day tend to forget, right? Or you don't see it. It becomes part of the furniture or part of the wallpaper, sometimes people say, because that's just how it always looks. But getting somebody in with fresh eyes to say, to identify, look, there's maybe this stack of empty boxes that don't need to be there, and maybe they should be in a warehouse or in a storage locker or something like that. Opening drawers, looking on workstations, what's posted on the walls. These are the things that I want to look at from a really physical sense of getting that house in order and looking at your facility. Those are the things that that I'm going to do first.
Oh
What
yeah,
about you?
I absolutely agree. When you were talking about like opening drawers, I've got flashbacks of like opening a drawer and like, finding lots of things that probably shouldn't have been there. Making sure that you've got controlled copies everywhere where an auditor might snoop. Yeah, looking up and down is a really good tip because, you want to make sure that they're confident in your work environment controls, right? So,
Yeah, first impressions. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and it really can go a long way to convey, that you keep your house. If you keep your house in order, it's a good chance that your records are also going to be in order.
yeah, absolutely. Also, it's a good time before the audit, isn't it, to educate staff in terms of audit practice, because one of the things that you want your staff to be going into the audit is just really confident, confident in their own abilities, to be able to handle any questions an auditor will throw at them. I mean, my thing is always like, if you don't know, just say, let me just refer to my SOP, which helpfully is just here. Because, the SOPs are going to be, ta-da, here is my SOP. They're going to be able to read it and have it to hand. So making sure that they're really comfortable in terms of those processes. I mean, you're going to be having your internal audits and, your internal audit schedule. So hopefully, all of your employees are relatively used to, getting audited, probably by, your friendly face. But maybe you should, throw a few like little more stern audits in there just to get them audit ready.
Yeah, and I think people tend to, get worked up about it, especially people who haven't been through it before, and they see or they have this idea that an inspector or an auditor is a big scary figure and somebody who's really imposing and really rigid, and that's not been my case. I think most of the external auditors that I've dealt with have been really personable, and they know their stuff, and you can talk to them as professionals and on the same page. And they are also aware that they're sort of interrupting a normal workday or a normal work practice for people. So if you're being observed doing something and the auditor asks you a question, it's perfectly okay to say, I'll answer that in a question. I really need to focus on this task at the moment. right? And so you finish the task at hand and then you address the auditor. And as long as you are respectful, it's going to be fine.
Absolutely. Like the worst thing you can do is argue with your auditor. They're there just to do just to do a job. And I remember when we went for when I worked for a previous company, we went for 1345 certification, and the auditor was telling me awful stories, of things that they were put through. And it's just not the way to be. Just be nice. Be nice to your auditor. They are human beings at the end of the day. So making sure that you're being respectful. But obviously you want to make sure that if you don't agree with something, that you've got that good relationship where you can put your boundaries in and just say, well, I don't agree with you on X, Y, and Z. And then you can have a nice sort of conversation about it, without it getting aggressive, because nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants that.
Absolutely. If you in a situation where you think you are compliant with the standard and what it's telling you, you're going to make your case. And this is the time of year that you are your organization's best advocate, and you're the voice for all the people in the organization who are not sitting in that boardroom with you, right? So if you think it's right, make your case, defend it. And if they say, no, I just don't agree with you, then that's fine. You accept that. You make sure that they understand what your perspective is and what your process is. And if they still find it non-compliant, then also accepting that information with grace.
Yeah, absolutely.
It will go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. In terms of like you mentioned who should be like in the boardroom, and I think this is a really good point to pick up on, because you don't want it to just be seen as a quality activity, do you? You want to make sure that you've got your process owners in the boardroom with you, so they can they can be empowered in their process. We spoke about this in the first, I think in the first episode, where we were talking about process owners like writing their own processes, and this is another reason why to get them to do that, isn't it? To make sure that they know their processes forwards and backwards, and feel confident when they're standing in front of an auditor to ask the questions on with regards to their process.
Yes, absolutely. Process owners, I like to make sure that they're available. I don't necessarily want a lot of people sitting in the boardroom with me all day long. Maybe a scribe, like another person from the quality assurance department who can take notes or go and retrieve documents that are requested or things like that. But then I want process owners to come in when they're needed and there are questions for them. Personally, I like to try and answer as many as I can with the evidence that's available. I know where the SOPs are. I can pull that up, demonstrate that, and hopefully move through things in a rapid pace. And then there are also times maybe where there are people who I don't want to put in front of an auditor.
And what kind of people are these, Suzy? What kind of people do you not want in front of an auditor?
Well, I'll tell you. I think people who are really, really nervous, like if they sort of lose their own confidence in the face of an auditor, like if it's a person who just really can't handle that, I don't need to put them in front of an auditor, and I will be their advocate and act on their behalf. There are people who are nervous talkers who can't stand the silence. If you can't stand the silence, get out of the boardroom.
The pauses, the power of the pause, isn't it?
Right.
Could you expand on this? Stop talking, and then that's it, because it's just a good way for them to extract more information out of you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's situation dependent, it's organization dependent, but I think that again, the quality manager or the quality director, person in that role is presenting their organization in the best possible light. And as we've spoken about in other episodes and other conversations, editing that back is an acceptable thing to do. And if you have to like hurt some feelings in the process, but you know what you're doing is the best thing for the organization, I'll do that every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. absolutely.
But it doesn't happen a lot. I don't want to act like every time I'm saying, look, you're in the room and you're not in the room. But it's an option.
You in that kind of thing. Yeah, no, I completely get your point. I think some people are sort of naturally more confident in those situations than, than others. And if you've got someone who's quite, shy and is nervous, just like you've been saying, it's probably not going to be the best developmental spot for them either to be thrust in front of an auditor. But maybe supporting, being in a supporting role might be advantageous. So I think that's a really good point. Pick and choose who's going to go to the boardroom and support those processes.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have people who aren't ideal candidates for interaction with an auditor directly, there's still a lot of things that they can do to support. We always need people who are looking for the records that have been requested. And I also like to have people review those records that have been requested prior to giving them to an auditor. And if you find something, then you can at least initiate the CAPA on it. So when you go in to present that to the auditor and you're saying, oh, these are the records that you've requested and we're going through them, you can say, and it's important that you always tell them and you're upfront about it, but you say, while we were looking at these, we did identify that there was an issue with such and such. We've gone ahead and issued a CAPA for it, and here's a copy of that. Or here's the reference information. And so, again, anytime that you can demonstrate to an auditor that you're finding your own problems and you don't need their assistance to find the problems, I think that's a win.
And also, how great does your CAPA system look? Double win. Absolute double win there. I think that's a great top tip.
Pro tip. And also, like, it brings up, and that example was about a record, but things don't always go as planned during an observation either during an audit. And it's also not the end of the world. Just like it's not the end of the world when you detect an error on a record. If something goes a little bit wrong in observation, you handle it in really the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that your procedures have got something in place to say if something XYZ happens, then follow this other process. But yeah, people make mistakes all the time, so they're going to make mistakes in front of an auditor. They're going to make mistakes, not in front of an auditor. It doesn't really matter, really, does it? As long as your processes are there to manage the corrective actions going forward, then there really isn't anything to worry about at all.
Right. And an auditor will usually say, okay, walk me through this process of what you're doing. And then the next question is, what do you do if something goes wrong? And so you can demonstrate in real time how that CAPA system works.
Yeah, perfect.
So yeah, I have seen this happen in audits, and I have seen auditors get super excited that they get to witness it happening in real time too. So
you've got to give them something, haven't you?
Right.
You've got to give them something. They're there. They're planning your audits. They've got to get your report to them, pretty quickly. So, if you can, follow your process when it doesn't work out, you've got to give them something to smile about, haven't you?
That's right. That's right. What else have you thought? I know we were talking about the boardroom and who is in the boardroom, but do you have any other tips for what should be present in the boardroom or not present? And when I'm saying boardroom, obviously I just mean whatever meeting room you're hosting your audit in.
Well, obviously quality policy. Make sure that bad boy is right there. Update, control copy, and all the rest of it. It's your nice quality policy that everybody can see. In terms of things that really need to be there, snacks.
Oh, yes.
Make sure you've got your snacks there. You got your water there, and make sure you know when lunch is. Those are really, really important, right? In terms of things that I don't think should be there. It's just kind of the same sort of process of getting your house in order. So making sure that it's a nice, clean, tidy place. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's comfortable. You're creating a comfortable, working environment. In terms of people, the way that audits have gone previously that I've managed, usually it starts off with management commitment, right? Because everybody's there. You get your opening meeting, management commitment, everyone's there. So you have usually your CEO and your top managers there. But as soon as that's gone, they can go. They don't need to be there. You've got this. You know exactly what you're doing. So yeah, making sure that people aren't hanging around too long, because they do have their own jobs to do. I mean, what do you think, Susie? Is there anything that you wouldn't want in the boardroom or the front
Yeah.
room?
Um, I agree with what you said. I think you've already covered sort of the main things. The other thing that I would say, which falls in line with getting your house in order, is just making sure that any of your dry erase boards, your whiteboards, have all been erased and cleaned
Yes.
before people are walking in there. Again, it's one of those things that kind of becomes part of the furniture and you don't necessarily see it if you're in there every day, but you don't
Yeah.
want that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what? That's a really good one because that's a very good one. I don't think I would have thought of that. So yeah, that was a very good pro tip. Second pro tip of the episode. Absolutely banging, amazing. Um, yeah. So in terms of like your records, getting your house in order, making sure everything's clean, tidy, and also looking at the status of your records and everything. Are there cappers that you can perhaps close out? Don't close them out too soon. If you need a little bit extra time, you need a little bit extra time. No problem there. Providing you've got your sound justification. But there's also like different styles of audits, aren't there? If you're going for initial 1345, for example, you can opt to go for a stage one audit before your stage two audit. And I think that the stage one audit is a really nice way to make sure that you're not going for 1345 too soon. Because essentially all they're going to be doing is looking at your quality documents, so not your records, so just your documents, to make sure that you've implemented everything in 1345 that you need to support your organisation. So it's a really nice sort of check to make sure that you've got everything in order before you go for your stage two. So it's a nice little preparation exercise, and then obviously when you get to your stage two, they're going to be looking at that information again, but also in your records. So it's a nice way to sort of gear people up for entering routine surveillance audits and your bid certification audit.
That's right. So with 1345 specifically, that process, you have a full recertification audit once every 3 years. And then in that audit, they're going to look soup to nuts at your whole system. But then in those intervening years, in between years, there's a smaller portion of the clauses or of the standard that they're going to focus on during those audits.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're usually shorter, but know that those scopes could be different. And then you may also have just a technical file audit sometimes. You can have follow-up audits if there have been issues in the past that an auditor says they need to come back and follow up on. Then that could be just a really tightly focused or very narrowly focused audit. If there have been recalls or corrections or safety notices or those kinds of things, you may get a specific evaluation just focused on that. So it could be any one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So making sure when you're planning to getting ready for this audit that you know exactly what the aim is. So if it's a manufacturing audit, you probably you don't want to be looking too much in terms of your design and development if they're going to be looking at manufacturing. So just making sure that you're planning accordingly.
Yeah. And then I guess the other types of audits. Now we've talked mostly here about like a 1345, like a certification audit or an FDA inspection, those kinds of things. But you may also have vendor audits. If you are a supplier of goods or materials, you may have other people come and audit you as a vendor. And those look a little bit different. They're usually shorter. It's usually like a 1 day situation, pretty high level. Um, as we've mentioned, we've talked about internal audits from the people who are in your site. But sometimes if you're in a large organization, there may be even another layer of internal audits. Like you can have your site people, your site quality team, and they're off doing their internal audits. You may also have like a corporate internal audit that might be from an independent audit group. Um, so not quite a third party audit, but still a bit different than your typical first party internal audit.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, lots of different types of audits that you as a quality manager will be getting your teeth into, and supporting the team to make sure that they're happy with what the audit scope is, and how to handle themselves as well in the
Yeah.
audit.
I think too, the other thing I want to mention here is that in order to really help your organization succeed in this, I think it's also really critical to maintain good communication with your team as the audit is ongoing.
Hmm.
So things that have been successful in the past have been things like Slack channels or Teams threads where you can kind of live stream the audit saying, "Oh, we're moving into this now," or "We're moving into this," or "I'm having trouble finding this. Can somebody, help me, tell me which SOP it is that I'm looking for to answer this question?"
I have to
That,
admit, sorry, I hadn't heard of Slack before. So, but then when you said Teams, I was like, right, okay. So it's just like an instant messaging.
yes,
So,
yes, another instant messaging kind
yeah,
of platform situation, but yeah,
nice.
basically just those
Yeah.
threads that can go.
Yeah, I had a really good experience with using a stream like that, where they had a front room and then a back room, and the back room was hectic, as you can imagine, with records, and they had a big projector on the screen so everybody could see what everybody was typing in the audit. So it was very good. So you had this kind of like this live feed. And then, at the end of the audit, we're all waiting for the auditors kind of like in the closing meeting, and there was a big hurrah after, everything was went by okay. So that was really good. So it was a really nice atmosphere. But yeah, like having a big screen so you can see, how everything is progressing. I think it's a great idea. But yeah, Slack, not heard of that one. So yeah, that's a new one for me.
Yeah, and then sometimes I've also done like a daily notes communication to
Ooh.
say your top management, so your CEO and CFO or those top managers, and it's also like helpful to your future self when you're looking at what did they look at last time, or because you can record not only the things that they specifically looked at as in these records, but you can also say these were concerns or this was an area of note, or even when it's been handled fine, it's kind of helpful.
Yeah, because you might also have near misses, right?
Yes, near misses,
Oh,
like, hey, we were lucky in this situation because
yeah.
we detected it and we opened up a kappa and so it was fine. But then after the audit, you want to go and look at that system and say, do we need to have some additional corrective actions or continuous improvement because we struggled a little bit?
Yeah, I always think that you should look at audits, and I know it might be a bit sadistic of me, but you should look at audits with a very sort of positive light, because they are ultimately there to make sure that you're doing what you should be doing, and the products that are going at your door are working in a system which will ensure their safety, and that is always something which I feel is very close to my heart. Just to making sure that everybody is following their processes, because the reason why we have audits and 1345 quality management systems, etc., is because what we're doing is something which is going to be directly impacting patients. So always making sure that you hold that dear. Yeah, so audits should be looking at like a positive thing, because ultimately, you know, I would say it's very, very rare that, you have an audit and, it's an absolute disaster. They want to close down your manufacturing site. And
Right.
to be honest with you, if it did get to that stage, maybe you shouldn't be in the company that you're working for, if I may be so bold. Um, you know, because we need to, as quality professionals, we need to make sure that everybody is adhering to these processes, and you've got your top management on board who are ultimately responsible for ensuring that everybody, you have a safe and effective, QMS. So think of it as positive, because they're only going to, suggest improvements to your system. So that's
Yeah,
why.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that's kind of my list of things to do for preparing for an external audit or
Yeah.
inspection.
Yeah, I think yeah, I've nailed it. I think those are all the things that I would be looking for as well, and some more. So yeah, make sure you erase those whiteboards. That's definitely a that's definitely a take home from my perspective. Absolutely.
Great. Well, what are we gonna? Do we even know what we're gonna talk about next time? Maybe.
I don't know. If anybody's got any suggestions about, I don't know, like things that you're unsure about, or I mean, I remember for the longest time, section 4.1, you know, the general requirements of 1345. I was just like, why is this here? It's just, you know, it's ultimately repeated. And then, you know, it's like, oh well, you know, aligns with the processes, blah blah blah. But if you have something which you really struggle with and you want us to have a chat about, you know, send us an email, qualitycoffeebreak@gmail.com, if I've got that correct. Yeah, nice.
Yes. Hmm.
Send us an email and we'll happily have a little chinwag about it. Because yeah, sharing is caring, right? You know, sharing is caring.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say too.
Was it? Oh man, great. I hope it was. It's been lovely, but until next time, quality nerds.
Don't panic. Read the SOP.